I know that we're overcomplicating AC as a concept. That's kind of what we always did back in the day. It was like our whole thing for like 7 years.
It's what we do.
It's what we did for a very long time. Still do on occasion. We make things overly complicated for your enjoyment. Delve, episode 7. We had an episode called Safe Inside the Shell, and that episode was about armor. And so we just talked about health. Now we get to talk a little bit about armor. And at the time, we were really talking about how you just figure out armor classes and about what they are and how they mitigate damage and different ways that they do that. But there was a follow-up question I had about that I wanted to discuss here, which is something that's always eluded me, especially when we talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So I think we're just gonna talk Dungeons and Dragons specifically for this, and the AC class of 5e. How do we differentiate between armor and dexterity for the AC class? Because if you know anything about that, if I have a high dexterity, or if I have a very low dexterity but I just wear a giant plate of metal on me, I might have the same armor class. Even though I am diametrically getting damage reduction or mitigation by very different means. One is because I am literally just like, I'm avoiding the damage, and one because my armor is thick enough that the damage doesn't hit me.
Mechanically speaking, there is no real difference if your AC and D&D is the same. Exactly,
which is why I'm thinking that there should be a way to differentiate, because they are so different in terms of what you're doing. They're just fundamentally different. And I keep thinking to myself that maybe it's about specific damage mitigation, even if you are getting hit, or if it's about speed. Like that, if you have really heavy armor, you might not be as fast on your feet, or you might...
Well, a lot of the times, if you're wearing really heavy armor, a lot of those suits in D&D, as an example, will have like a disadvantage on stealth, for instance.
Yes.
Heavy armor. But I also... Yes. Yeah, the heavier armor. But I also think that you would have a tough time with reflex or evasion or with your dexterity saves.
Yes. These are other things.
I know that heavier armor also impedes your actual movement speed, but not necessarily your initiative. Yeah. So like if you have a max dex of 2, you can only add 2 of your dexterity bonus, even if you have 4 to your AC. Okay. But at that point, you'd be wearing a lighter armor anyways. There's no point if you have an AC that is +4, you would be using a armor that doesn't let you take full advantage of it. But the issue that you're talking about is one of mitigation, which, again, going back to like the Warhammer ones, mitigation is important. Armor that is big and bulky but negates more damage is good, because it means you're taking less damage and it's harder to get through the armor. Lighter armor might be great because it lets you evade attacks more, where the bigger, tougher armors are going to be like, yeah, you don't get a dodge. It doesn't give you any bonus to dodge. It doesn't actually takes away your chance to dodge. And the lighter ones are like, you can dodge, but this is not going to offer you nearly as much damage mitigation. I think a game, and I'm loath to say it, but a game that actually does a really good job with this is your FromSoft games.
Thanks.
Because your big, heavy armors negate a lot more damage. They offer a lot of protection at the cost of not being as mobile.
Yeah, and you start to feel that a lot when you start to put on really heavy armor, because you just being able to roll is nigh on impossible, the heavier the armor set is. Just moving is a general rule, and you use so much more stamina. When you're wielding like heavy weapons, you definitely use a lot more stamina, but it goes down faster, which is the reason why they try to kind of give you the idea that heavier armor is not always better and is usually very detrimental, because you can't evade a lot of attacks. You could if you were wearing practically nothing. for
Which is
your
why
load.
some players actually just play that game with no armor. Naked.
Yep. Well, and because the way that they do that too is your load is set up so that it's light or medium or heavy, and that affects a lot of things. It affects how well you can dodge and parry and all of that stuff, but it also will affect the heaviness of your attacks. If I remember this correctly, like, you have more force behind your attacks if you have heavier loadouts, but you can't attack as fast. So there's definitely a reason why you would want to lower it so that you're not totally encumbered. Although I guess that there are some builds where they've made them like really heavy, and the force you get from the weapons, if you have like big heavy weapons, when you do hit, is just devastating. But
Sure.
that's more from an offensive standpoint than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to a dexterity class, there isn't a lot that it benefits from besides the, oh, look, I'm just really fast on my feet. Which is, I guess, the reason why I felt like there should be more differentiation, because wearing a giant piece of armor or wearing nothing and just, being able to run through the tires really quickly apparently equates to the same damage mitigation number. And it feels like that doesn't make sense in practice.
And not all, but a lot of tabletop games suffer from that, because the trade-off becomes, well, do we want to have armors all negate damage? Like, do you want to have each armor have a mitigation to it? Or do we just want to give it, like, an armored class that's hit? And the more you add to that, the more it actually will bog down the combat a bit more, so simplifying it is good. I know in the game, when I had been working on an RPG myself, I had said that you could take skill points in the combat skills too, like taking points in learning how to use weapons, learning how to use armor better.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably explained this years ago. Find it in an episode of the old show. But the difference was that, say you want to specialize in light armor, you get a skill point, or however many skill points, and then you can be like, all right, you can do an upgrade now. You can either choose to put a point into increasing the armor value,
Mm-hmm.
or you can put a point into increasing, like, dexterity value of it.
Okay.
So either you can go, this armor is going to allow me to move better in it, or it will just straight up add more mitigation to me. So it's either you can be harder to hit or take less damage. And then each time you leveled up that skill, you could choose one or the other. So you could go light armor, full mitigation route, or light armor, full evading attacks route, for instance. And with doing that, you could take it so your light armor would potentially have the same armor value as a piece of heavy armor, because of the way you've learned how to use it. On the side note to that, you could also take your heavy armor or your medium armor. No one ever uses medium armor, though.
Right.
You could take the heavy armor and you could say, I'm going to keep adding to the armor mitigation here, so that I would take even less damage. This heavy armor now becomes impenetrable.
Sure.
I'm taking an extra 5 less damage each hit. Or you could go the other route and make it so your heavy armor has the movement functionality and hit evasion of a lighter armor. So you go, this thing blocks a lot of damage, but I can evade more attacks. So you could kind of mix and match that, and then if you wanted to, again, fully optimize, no armor, or no damage, like take very minimal damage, or just maximize your evasion.
Sure.
And I thought that was an interesting way to do that, because then at least you're giving your armor variety and making them feel very distinct because of how you decide you want to use them.
It's sort of like, you remember Fallout, right? From back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, there was a change that they made in how they represented armor from Fallout 3 to Fallout New Vegas. There was something in Fallout 3 called damage reduction, and in New Vegas it was called damage threshold. and they function very differently, DR and DT. So your armor values in Fallout 3 were like a mitigation of damage that you would take. So you have a damage reduction of like 10. It's like 10% is what you're mitigating of whatever you would be hit with. Damage threshold was basically the number that the damage would have to be for it to actually hurt you. So if you have like a damage threshold and it's like 25, and someone hits you with a little gun and it only does like 15 points of damage, it basically does like nothing to you at all. The second it gets over that 25, though, it's like doing full damage.
Which is weird. Honestly, that's weird.
When they did it with
it's like,
Vegas,
oh, I do 24 damage, you take 0 damage. 26 damage, you take 26 damage.
I think the representation of that was that what it would take to penetrate the armor, but once it gets through the armor,
sure,
it would be technically
but like
through you.
I guess
that it's.
I guess. I mean, if you wanted to go with a bulletproof vest as an example, technically a bullet that doesn't pierce the bulletproof vest, is going to not like hurt you, but it's still gonna hurt. Like you would still take a couple points of bludgeoning damage from a bullet hitting you in the chest with a bulletproof vest on.
Well,
but once that goes,
you're not gonna like it. You're not gonna like it.
But once that bullet goes through the vest, you've taken optimal damage. You've taken a lot more damage.
Right.
But in the case of the threshold being it's either 0 damage or full damage.
I think it was like 1 damage or something. Like if it doesn't hit the threshold, it's like very minimal, and then it was like full damage.
I don't know if you do something like that. See, in tabletop, that gets to the point where it's too much min-maxing. I think at that point, not min-maxing, but like you're putting a lot more in it than makes it fun at the table. I think for a lot of people, because suddenly it's like, all right, well, you need to do all this math right here, right now. And it bogs everything down. So like you could be like, oh yeah, if it doesn't, hit your AC or it doesn't go past it, you could be like, all right, you take like less damage. And that's fine. But like, reduce damage by half. Okay, but then people are just going to aim higher. It's a weird system.
Yeah. Because, I mean, damage threshold, though, I think is more representative of what the AC system is, because it is like a number that you have to hit over, and if you do hit over it, you take the full damage of it, unless you have some other mitigation tactic when it comes to D&D.
I mean, that AC is just a measure of whether you get hit or not.
Right.
And then if you have like damage reduction, then it's like, all right, you've been hit, but you also have damage reduction. So there is a mitigation system in there. It's just not everyone does not have the ability to tap into it.
I do like that there are like feats that when they started to focus a little bit more on feats with 5e that make you better at utilizing armor. Not just because you have to have light or medium or heavy armor if you are going like proficiency so that you can use them, but they also created expertise classes that actually gave you bonuses for having them on. I think the best one people cite is if you are a heavy armor user, there's heavy armor expert, and if you get hit with a normal weapon and it actually does do damage to you, it reduces all sources by 3. So it is in many ways
brutal.
It is a literal damage reduction even after you get hit. So, which especially in the early game is huge, because you're probably not running across a lot of people with magical weapons or fireballs. But from normal damage just to get straight damage reduction, which I understand for a heavy armor user, that's not something that you would get with light armor. One thing that I think could be very useful though, for light armor, if you are a dexterity class, is to lean into the whole dexterity thing, which is that not only, you're taking the full brunt of something if you hit over the AC, but maybe having the opportunity to do counterattacks or parries or something like that to maybe stagger your enemy for a return.
Sure, I don't think that would count in towards the armor as much as it would be skill with weapons, however.
Right. I'm just trying to think of ways that you could utilize it in different ways by having those. Like, I've successfully mitigated this, which means that I have avoided the attack, but on the back end of that, I can actually do something. I think that monks have something similar to that. Like, if you're going to get hit by an arrow, it's that deflect missile thing. You know, you can reduce the damage that you take from a missile, but then you can also, if you deflect all of the damage from the missile, you also have an attack of opportunity that you can do, where you toss the missile back. Which I thought was always fun, because I just like the image of the idea of the monk just, like, catching the arrow midstream and just, like, whipping it around and just throwing it back. I know that we're overcomplicating AC as a concept. That's kind of what we always did back in the day. It was like our whole thing for like 7 years.
It's what we do.
It's what we did for a very long time. Still do on occasion. We make things overly complicated for your enjoyment. But I guess if anyone has some ideas on how you could creatively use armor classes or damage mitigation in unique ways so that we can figure out how to do it with heavy armor and light armor that was not done by FromSoft, please
that was not done by me.
Or Alex way back when in the EXP Limited system, which never got released.
Yeah, well, you know, that's not what it was named anyway, so it's fine.
I thought that's what No?
That's just me.
Oh. Secret EXP project.
So secret that I don't even know what it is.
Project Blue Book.
No, that's different. That's declassified.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, so it's definitely not declassified for us.